well-known personal computers, local and wide area network, cloud, and cybersecurity. Juan's career in IT has allowed him to apply his expertise on both an domestic and international scale, working for entities like the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank, and serving in multiple divisions within Hughes. He has consulted with customers in Europe, Africa, and Latin America to implement or support terrestrial and satellite networks when he worked in the international division. Since 2008, he has worked in the cybersecurity division, where he leads a team of 7 engineers to protect the workplace network infrastructure using optimal security practices. Juan grew up in the beautiful city of Lima, Peru, and later immigrated to the United States in 1989 with his wife Sara and his son Andres to build a better future and raise his family. Over the years, his son Juan Jr. and daughter Rebecca were born. Juan received his undergraduate degree in industrial engineering from the Universidad de Lima and earned his master's in business administration from ESAN, also in Lima. After moving to the US, he acquired a Master of Science degree in Information and Telecommunications Systems from Johns Hopkins University. Juan also enjoys sharing his knowledge and expertise with his students, finding open source distributions to experiment with at his at-home lab, and has multiple hobbies in this area like voice over IP, building your own VPN, multimedia organization, video streaming, intrusion detection and prevention systems, dealing with networks attacks, and many more using accessible hardware and almost always free software. Do what you say, what you're going to do, and do it right the first time while delivering solutions with quality, security, and on time is the principle that Juan carries with him throughout his work. Juan has earned multiple awards for his performance and collaboration, but what has been most important to him is earning the respect of his teammates and friends during his professional tenure. Juan, it is an honor to have you here at the Hub to join us and all of our guests in the Hub, and also joining us virtually. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. My pleasure being here. I have prepared something for you to talk about my career, my interests, and the journey, what happened with me since I graduated from my bachelor's degree, right? At the end of this, I titled this presentation, you are going to tell me if it's a career success or not. Because the definition of success, I guess, is very personal and can be defined in multiple areas. So let's start with my first microcomputer. I was already, this was 1982. Yes, I was in college. I started my career, my undergrad in 1977. 1982 was the year I was finishing. And my attention went to these microcomputers, this new thing, because an industrial engineer is supposed to be working from the beginning in a manufacturing line, like in car assembly line. Actually, I did an intern in a Volvo factory, and I was put on the assembly line and technical drawing. I didn't like it. To my good luck, I was able to put my hands on this little computer, a Commodore, and start playing with that. And really what drove my attention was the multiple things that this little toy, because this particular model was oriented for games at that time. As you can see, there is a keyboard. This is an all-in-one device, 1 megahertz CPU speed. And I will start talking about that because the way this technology has evolved is still amazing to me. Nobody taught me. I simply went to the manuals. At that time, the manuals were in English, and I didn't understand much of English, but I managed to start playing around and learn that programming language called BASIC, that still exists today. Primarily in Microsoft, it's called Visual Basic for applications. In my opinion, it's still very powerful. But the way what allows me to learn this is because in college, I took Fortran 4 formula translation, a scientific programming language, and then I took also COBOL. common-oriented business language, a package that allows you to do accounting and payroll and marketing, flat files. So both those languages gave me the skill, I say, to start playing around and figure out how the new language would work. The next page, oh, I am moving here, right? The next experience that I had in a company that were my first job, they purchased this Commodore. Yeah, now they look like a microcomputer, right? But it was a monolithic, the monitor and the case, were one unit. And they have a detachable floppy diskette drive. Most of you, the youngest one, don't even know how the floppy diskette drive look like. But I was able to start doing some word processing there. And you can see in the slide, it uses the MOS 6502 1 megahertz CPU. There is no relationship, direct relationship between a megahertz and the cycles of a bit, but it's related with the compute power of the CPU. Today we have 3 gigahertz CPUs, right? But that little computer started doing some word processing. Eventually, the company that I work for, they bought the more advanced model, the 8032 model, that start coming with these applications. If you are familiar with Microsoft Excel, at that time, Excel didn't exist. It was called from a company, VisiCalc. Okay, it still uses BASIC, and with that basic language, I was really making trying to remember what I did there, but I remember I wrote my first payroll application. My company happened to have about 200 employees, so I was able to code a payroll application, sales forecast using, if you are a college, Fourier series. I don't know if you have ever seen the statistical functions, and Fourier was one of those complex models, I think. I just remember the name by these days. I also wrote a sales system to collect sales orders and to dispatch the orders to operations. I was looking if VisiCalc already still exists, and I didn't find it existing. This is not missing. Okay. VisiCalc, that was the spreadsheet that I used before. It started running in those computers, Apple II, Apple SOS, CPM. I remember the name. That was a very nice operating system. Atari was a system for games as well, right? And then you can see Hewlett Packard Series 80, TRS DOS from Radio Shack. Radio Shack used to have a computer line called Tandy, and the first portable Tandy computer was like a briefcase, very heavy, this big, but it was portable. Okay. In word processing, these Commodore machines have a Word Pro Plus, and then came the compatible computers, right? When IBM adopted the Intel CPU 8086 first, 6 bits CPU, and eventually the 8088, 8-bit CPU, one word at a time can be processed. IBM XT, IBM AT, advanced technology, I believe the AT stands for. But then the applications start developing, and you have WordStar, you have DBase, and you have SuperCalc. If you have those 3 applications in your computer, you have a very good package there. Other applications start popping up in the market. I remember Multiplan was the first spreadsheet from Microsoft. Okay, and there were many others. Quattro Pro was from Novell, if I recall correctly. Lotus 123, very famous, very powerful, and last several years. And as you can see, and Lotus also have a package called Lotus Symphony. In my experience, it's the first package that brought a spreadsheet, word processor, a database, and a presentation package. But from this company, Lotus 123. That's more in a nutshell what I did with PCs. And then my company purchased these mini computers. They were called mid-range computers. On the left side, you see the bigger model of an IBM System 36. On the right side, you see the mini, a smaller model. Actually, I learned this in my country. When I came to the United States, my first job in what I know happens to be in a company called AFANS, United Mine Workers of America. They happen to have the big model in the headquarters in Washington and 10 the smaller systems in field offices, all connected through modems at that time. And I developed that company process benefits for the mine workers, health benefits and all those things. And I did all the work processing applicable to merge the data given by an application to create the final document sent to the mine workers. The challenge was that I have microcomputers and I have the mid-range computer, how to integrate them. And look at the microcomputer. It has a hard drive, 30 megabytes hard drive. And as a big thing, 1.5 gigabytes hard drive. But it was multi-user and multitasking. Okay, so that was a big advance. And had an operating system. Remember, it was called IPL, Initial Program Loader. It took like 15 minutes to put up, at least. But it had a very powerful programming language called RPG2, Report Program Generator version 2. I never knew if there was a version 1, but I knew that after this, there was version 3. But it was a very powerful, similar to COBOL. It was oriented for business applications, for payroll, for accounting, for ledgers. The databases were not relational. They were flat files. And you need to do all of that with those gigantic 500. They were not 5.25. They were probably as big as this iPad, the diskette drive, the diskette. And the drive you see is very big. So I have summarized this saying what was required back in the early and mid-80s. Primarily, I knew 2 operating systems, the IBM mid-range and PC-based, MS-DOS, and 2 programming languages, the IBM's RPG2 and the BASIC that runs on the personal computers. And the challenge, and perhaps one of the best things that I did at the time, was that I discovered some expansion cards that were installed on the microcomputers to integrate that microcomputer work into the mid-range computer. It was called Emulation 5250. It was a protocol translator, translate the protocol, the language, the mid-range computer used to talk with the MS-DOS. And and provides file transfers. You can copy files from one system to another one, and you integrate the microcomputer, the intelligent terminal, right? It's a wrong term, because before there were dumb terminals, basically a screen where the signaling from the keyboard travels from the terminal to the mid-range computer, and the result came back. That's why there was no intelligence. There was no CPU in those terminals. The PC changed that, right? And very, very important, there were no certifications at that time. I had friends that worked for NCR, for digital equipment, and when we talk about what we used to do, the conversation always ended that we work with incompatible systems. If there was one piece of software that runs on NCR, that software didn't exist on IBM or was a different software, the file format was different, they were completely incompatible. Okay. Then in the late 80s and the 90s, we have the local area networks, right? There was this company called Novell Network, that the way I describe it, that company was the king of local area networks. While Windows, Microsoft Windows, evolved to what we see there, Microsoft Windows for Workgroups, which was Windows, but running on a peer-to-peer configuration. Peer-to-peer meant that if you have Novell local area network and you have your computer running Windows, one computer could be designated as a printer server and share the printer across other computers. cybersecurity didn't exist. I mean, physical security exists, but cybersecurity didn't exist. So people used to share drives. Hey, your computer has a 20, 30 gigabytes of hard drive, and I am short of storage. Let me share it. And computers producing Windows for Workgroups were able to share resources such as that, not only printers. For the administrator, that was a nightmare because really peer-to-peer networking create what we know today as a mesh network. You don't know who is connected to whom and who is doing what with somebody else's resources. Okay, but that's what the technology was. And here is my summary, what was required in the 90s. Now you need to be familiar with Windows for Workgroups, 3.11. Need to know how to do peer-to-peer networking with those protocols, NetBEUI, NetBIOS, Windows NT. I believe NT stands for new technology. Okay. Server services, because now Microsoft start providing mail server, web server, and they even have gateway servers to talk to mainframes using SMA, I believe was the acronym for the protocol. And look at that. We start having certifications on the market. Microsoft released the Microsoft Certified Engineer. And Novell have the Certified Network Engineer. And I tell you, many other companies such as Oracle, they start creating their certifications, right? So there were many, and the market was evolving very fast, but at the same time, other operating systems start showing up. Linux, for example, is the evolution of Linux comes from Unix. This is the open source side of the market, right? Where Linux comes from Unix. Unix was a scientific operating system used by the scientific community. Open source is free. If you have a better good idea how to transfer a file, okay, write the code and bring it back to the community for free, distribute it for free. And that's why today we have multiple licenses, but they are all fitting into the open source community or group of software, right? So now we have more operating systems to learn. And lucky for us, all of them has become compatible with each other. There is a very big standard TCP/IP that makes the network traffic across multiple systems transparent and compatible. In my experience, Java did the magic to provide on the, I think it's called on the fly compile, right? That application, you write your software and you compile it, Java will compile it on the fly depending on the hardware. So what I found in my experience is that a good combination of skills was to have an academic background, right? Number one. If you have a master's, much better. When I did my first master's, I noticed that I was able to aim for perhaps better jobs. But here I found that it was very common to have 2 masters or more. And now the combination of academic background, either undergrad plus master's degree, plus certifications, because now we're living out in the world of certifications, right? And experience. So the longer you work in a place, the more you learn from a place, you experience, practice. This is the way I say it. Practice builds expertise. Right? The more you practice, the more expert you become in the area you are working on. Now we have multiple places to look for a job. When I look for my jobs back in my country, and even here when I came 35 years ago, I used to pick up the phone and talk to a person. I am applying for this position that I found in the Washington Post. Today, you need to spend sometimes part-time or sometimes full-time for several weeks time, putting your resume that took you 4 weeks to polish into every one of these single engines, right? And the big difference is, I will make a jump right now. I was working for Hughes about 16 years. And then a friend of mine recruited me for another company, and I was saying, okay, let's go there. But about a year and a half later, I was laid off. The company had some problems, and some group of employees got laid off. And I already work in cybersecurity, but where I work cybersecurity till today is called network security. Okay. So in my applications, network security was all over the place. And 4 months after the layoff that I was looking for a job, I didn't get any call, no request for an interview. And I was really thinking, what is going on here, right? And one day I thought, let me change the network security word for cybersecurity. I tell you, the next day or the next week, I start getting calls for interviews. My conclusion is that this software, the engines behind that, check or select all the applicants that have this checkbox check. And network security was not a buzzword. Cybersecurity was. Well, long story short, I came back to Hughes to my lab. Okay. So what is required today? Multi-platform support. We have multiple operating systems. We have multiple desktops to support. We have what is called data centers. I remember when I started my career, the data centers were not called data centers. They were called the call centers for telephony, but not for the humongous data centers for storage and compute power that we have today, right? We have today cloud services. Everything is on the cloud, right? Mostly, not everything, but a lot of things are on the cloud, and we have multi-cloud providers. The big players are Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. There are other players, and sorry if I don't mention their names, but I work with the 3 that I mentioned. Virtualization services, multiple ways to virtualize the hardware. Anybody with some experience using virtual machines? If I want to have Ubuntu Linux, Alma Linux, Rock Linux, a Mac, and a Windows computer, I count 5, right? Back in the day, I need 5 computers, 5 monitors, 5 keyboards, 5 mice. Did I forget something? I mentioned all of that, right? And a big desk, a lot of real estate for that. Today, depending on the compute power of a laptop, I can have all those machines running concurrently. Only one piece of hardware, one mouse, one keyboard, one computer, and I can deploy virtual machines, right? And there are multiple ways to virtualize, multiple software providers that provide virtualization technologies. And my latest toy to play with virtual machines is a Raspberry Pi, a credit card size computer. When I found it like 6 years ago, I started doing some stuff with that, but eventually I started finding that bigger and bigger software manufacturers are migrating their software to the Pi. Of course, it's going to run a subset perhaps of the big enterprise version, but if you want to learn virtualization, as I said to my students, you don't need to spend a fortune. With very little money and open source software, you can have a very decent lab to play with. Multiple operating systems. Well, Windows, Microsoft Windows continues being Microsoft Windows. I define it as the king of the desktop. But there are multiple Linux servers out there for mail, for voice over IP, for streaming, you name it. So Linux is, in general, is a very good thing to learn. It enriches your view of the entire network, how different pieces of software interact, because there is a standard, right? There is a TCP/IP standard at the network level. And then applications can talk to each other, exchange data. There are multiple data. I learned as well that still there are no gateways. Gateway is a device that joins the similar network, right? In general, that is the raw definition to me of a gateway. Perhaps in the application side, we need more gateways to let applications on one platform to exchange information from another platform. Basically, in software, you can do magic, right? I think that is another lesson that I have learned in software. You do magic, things that were impossible years ago. Just the integration of all these devices is possible because of the standards and because software has evolved in a way. And you name it, I think we are living the beginning of artificial intelligence. And we see these little movies with robots and things, the drones. Who could imagine, kids today are playing with drones, kids are playing with these devices, right? So that evolution is amazing. Programming languages, there is a super long list, the different flavors of C's, the C Sharp, C, C++, Go, R, Swift, PHP, Perl, Ruby, Bash, you name it. So far, I work with Visual Basic for applications. I do some programming in Bash. I understand a little bit of Python. My core work is on cybersecurity, but I need to do certain automation, so I do it in Python and Bash, for example. I do reporting using Visual Basic for applications. I import devices into a CSV file, compatible with Excel, and I crunch the numbers there. My academic background, this is going, I hope that I don't bore you much with this, but this is going to be my description of how my career evolved. Okay. And after this, I will jump into what I call the journey, why all of this helped me to develop my career. So in 1982, I earned my bachelor's in industrial engineering. In 1984, my master's in business. In 1988, my master's from Johns Hopkins in information and telecommunication systems. Work-wise, I work for this company, Sandoval S.A. It was a relocation company, international moving company, warehouse and other services. When I came to the States, those are the ones that gave me the opportunity to play with the Commodore microcomputers, the IBM microcomputers, and the System 36. Okay, I was a manager of IT in that company. When I came to the United States, let me tell you, the most difficult thing was the language. When I was a kid in high school, I went to 2 institutions in my city. One was sponsored by the American Embassy and the other one is sponsored by the British Embassy, each one providing English classes, formal English classes. And I attend them all. And I used to read. I never practiced talking. My writing was semi-decent, okay? When I came to this, when my wife and I decided to come to the States, I swore that it was going to be okay. By the way, my wife was born here in the US, so we decided to come here to study. I was planning to do my PhD in finance. My wife is a biologist, and also she wants to do a master's in biology. By the time we came, we already have our 1 year, 2 month boy, and my wife was pregnant for the second time. But we came, and I was blessed with the documentation, so I was free to look for any job that I can apply for. But I tell you, when I came, I couldn't understand anything. Zero English. My wife was born here and she came back to Peru with her family when she was 5 years old. And she remembered. She was my translator and I couldn't understand a word. And that was very, very shocking. Okay? And difficult. But having her to my side, she was the one that started looking for jobs for me. And one day, she showed me from the Washington Post a small ad that says S/36 UMWA and the address in Washington, D.C. Call this number. And she told me, call this number. And I was able to call them and get an interview. But for that to happen, I haven't put it in the slide, but I told you that the language was a very, very, very big problem. So when we came, I didn't have a credit history. That didn't exist in Peru. I didn't have references. At that time, people knew each other because of fax machines. There was no email. And the only thing to talk to somebody was long distance calls that were extremely expensive. So I came under those circumstances. And although I have my green card and I was able to apply for any job, the language didn't help, right? So, and actually me and my wife went to a cousin's house, which was very nice. We have a roof to, what is the expression, a roof under our heads, right? Or not under, above our heads, right? So we have a place to live there. My cousins were very nice, but I need to find a job. So one day, the house was here in Potomac, and we learned how to go to the local giant. And there was a big sign, now hiring. So I went there and got an interview, and I got my first job as a cashier for Giant. Okay. And let me tell you an anecdote. Being an engineer that had a master's degree and was a manager in a very respectable company, I was feeling being a cashier is a respectable job as well. I don't minimize that, but it was a problem with me, right? The first shocky experience, I just try to put yourself in my mental state those days. My first shocky experience was when I was helping a lady to put the bags into the trunk. And when I was saying, or she was saying goodbye, she gave me $1. Okay, and it was okay, but I felt, what is this, right? And a friend of mine, this is another anecdote. I've been always very lucky to find good people during my life. I have a friend from Guatemala, cashier as well, and it happened that the schedules were the same. So he told me, why do you feel bad? I remember he told me, I made $40 last week just on tips. Okay. And he told me, how much do you pay for cable TV? $40. There you go. That is your cable TV in 1 week. He gave me that lesson, right? At the same time, that was motivation for me to improve my language and my English, and I enrolled into Montgomery College to study English. Okay. So I got my job at Giant from 3 to 10, and then my wife the other day told me, look at this. At the corner of the apartments where we found our first apartment, she found a bank. I think the bank doesn't exist. First Maryland Bank. I remember the logo, it was green logo. She told me they are hiring. So I went to the interview and I was hired to be teller in the morning, cashier in the afternoon and night. But 9 months later, my wife came with this Washington Post ad. Look at this, System 36. So I got a phone interview, and my English in 9 months, I was able to understand more than talk. So my answers were yes, no, fine, I'll be there, right? Okay. And I went to this interview, and 5 people I remember interviewing me. I consider myself at that time, I was a software developer in RPG2. I have written by that time multiple applications, and I was hired. And I lasted in that company, how long? 4 years, right? I started as a technical support specialist for desktop support. And also I started practicing, I saw the System 36, right? They gave me responsibility as a software developer. So I was doing desktop support plus software development in this RPG2. Eventually, I found a job at Adventist Healthcare in Atlantic because in the UMWA is when I started learning Novell and Windows for workgroups. I started learning that by myself. So when I felt strong in that area, I started looking for another job and found the opportunity to work for the hospital here on Shady Grove, right? And I started working there as a Windows applications analyst. Then I found in the same hospital another position, decision support systems analyst, where I learned how to work with Oracle databases. So my Microsoft ODBC and Microsoft Access, I used to develop applications to connect to Oracle And I remember wrote applications for the labor and delivery department, radiology department, admissions. I think those are the main three areas that I remember writing software for them. Then what happens, in the meantime, when I was in the hospital, my wife gave me another lesson, because during these years, the idea when we came to the US was to do my PhD and her master's. And, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and neither of us started the master's or the PhD, and my English, I felt, no, I cannot start because the English is not good. And one day she came and told me, look at this. I was admitted at Johns Hopkins. Ah, right? So she did the first step. She took the first step. So I don't remember if it was weeks later or a month later, but I did the same thing. I got admitted to Johns Hopkins for a master's in finance. Because my MBA was mostly on finance. My friends from Peru, all of them were in finance, so I was also in finance. But I think was finishing the first semester that Johns Hopkins opened this new branch, new program for information system, right? So I really enjoyed it, because in the hospital, I met a friend, another good thing in my life. I was doing software development, and this friend of mine, he was the one in charge of routers and switches. And he wanted to learn software, and I really like the hardware area. And when I saw the new program at Johns Hopkins, that was what I call hardware-oriented, router switches and all those things, I switched. Forget about finance. I really want to do networking. And I graduated from Johns Hopkins. And it was the last semester where I applied to Hughes Network Systems. I was lucky I would say I was lucky, because still my English was not as fluent as today. I think my English is kind of fluent, and I can express my thoughts, but at that time it still was difficult, more difficult, right? I have developed my career at Hughes. I have worked in 4 divisions. If you're not familiar with Hughes, it's here on exit 13. It's an internet service provider. We do networks over satellite networks and also terrestrial networks, consumer and enterprise. And, it's a place where I developed my career. I found terrific people. The thing that I like the most at where I work is the people, my very good team. And I started as a senior network engineer in what was called the satellite networks division. And I started traveling inside the US to support customers, local customers. Then I got the opportunity to become a technical manager in that division. And then I was promoted to be a principal engineer in the international business group. I went from the domestic group to the international group. Eventually, after 4 years, he was there in the international group, where I have multiple super nice experiences traveling worldwide. I went to Sydney, I think it was a bank, I don't remember the name. I've been in Botswana, Botswana Telecom, very nice experience working there. In Europe, I went to Portugal, Madrid, Rome, and London for a network, for an embassy network. Then, because I speak Spanish, I was given accounts in Mexico, so that's why I work for all in Mexico, you have Petroleum of Mexico, Pemex. Telecommunications of Mexico, Telmex, right? I work for Pemex, Telmex, and Satellites of Mexico, Satmex, big 3 companies over there, government companies. But extremely very good experience working in those big places. So the international business group gave me that opportunity. What else I did here? Then I transferred to the network security group. I really was looking for something in security. Cybersecurity word was not used at that time, as far as I remember. So I went to this security group and became a security analyst. I started working with fireworks, very interesting devices. I spent there some years until I was, as I mentioned before in the parentheses, recruited to work for another company here. It's a smaller company called Ultisat. I was hired as a principal engineer, but very soon I took the role of information assurance manager, which is oriented to security as well. After the incident, I came back to Hughes, and I am there till today. I came back as an engineer, but I will say to my good luck, I was given the opportunity to become the manager of my former group. And that's what I've been doing since the last almost 7 years, right? From network security, network manager one. They use the word technical because I don't want to abandon the technical area. Okay, I was promoted to manager two, and that's what I do today. I deal with all aspects, or many aspects. I will say a lot of aspects of cybersecurity. I work with brilliant people in the routing and switching area, learning every day. What I like is every day, I tell you, every day I learn something new. And the team is very strong. I feel the coach of my team, not only manage them, I do not only sign their timesheet, but I am one more engineer with them. We get the job done no matter what. And here are the different lessons, principles, I will say mottos, all right? How to reach a career success. In my experience has been select a field that you work with passion. I teach at Montgomery College Cisco certification, CCNA and Security Plus. And one of my jokes is this weekend, your party is with Cisco Packet Tracer. Okay, so Saturday and Sunday is Cisco Packet Tracer. Because if you really want to become a good professional, you will be willing to sacrifice these weeks in order to learn what you need to learn. The party will come after. The fun, that kind of fun will come after. You need to learn, and you need to prove to yourself that you enjoy working on what you do. In that way, if that is true, in my opinion, it won't be boring, okay, and it will become easy, right? If you do something that you enjoy, it's going to become easy. And I can tell you something that is not easy, that I don't enjoy much. I never improve. I don't read novels. I love history. I can read books about history, but novels is not in me. But you give me a new electronic toy, and I will not sleep a couple of days until I figure it out how to use it, because I enjoy it. And whatever becomes or looks difficult, when I find the solution, I always realize there was always a good reason why it didn't work, because I did this and that wrong. And now I know how to do it. Becomes easy. And I enjoy it. And I transfer the knowledge. I also enjoy to share the knowledge with my colleagues. Keep ethics on top of everything. If you are ethical, all your other values will be correct. That's something that I have learned many years ago. Be happy with who you are and what you have. I recently was talking to some friends, and the topic of money came to the table. And I said, I am not rich, I am not millionaire, but I support my family. I am happy with who I am and what I do. And in Spanish, there is a joke, you may help me to translate it. Ni zozobra ni fa falta. There is no excess and there is no lack of things at home, right? If you open the freezer, there is food. If it's cold, you have heater. If it's hot, you have AC, everything. We travel. We have my family, we travel once a year or every 2 years. During the pandemic, we didn't travel, but before the pandemic, we went to China. Super nice experience, right? So, does that qualify me as a rich person? I will say no. I have my mortgage like everybody, right? Working to pay it off. So I think that is a key factor there. Be happy with what you have and what you are, right? Respect, I put there respect to earn. I think that it's better respect to be respected, right? Respect brings respect. Be always honest with your performance. Do your best. I have failed in many ways, multiple times, and I have put myself in trouble. And then I got this sensation that what do I do now? And that night I don't sleep. I keep working until I fix it, right? Because that is the attitude to be honest with your performance. It's not I broke something and it's not my problem anymore, right? If I am there and I can fix it, or it's my job to fix it, I must fix it, right? What other things? Be a team player. I grew up, as I tell my students, I grew up in the streets of San Michael, San Miguel, and as a kid, I play on the street. I play soccer on the street. And when a car passed by, everybody screamed, car, and everybody froze. Car passed, and then the game continues. And, you know, you want to belong to the team that always won. You want to be a good player. And that built in me, I think, the principle of team player. And when I apply that to the workplace, I will say nobody is capable to do everything. Nobody knows everything. This may sound extremely silly or logical, nobody knows everything, right? But sometimes you may find some team players that are not good team players, right? So you need to find a way to integrate with that colleague and put the persons in the best location where they perform the best. And the team will perform as a team. Be proactive, don't procrastinate, be a researcher, never-ending learning. That's really me. I always, every time that I see a new technology, okay, let me see how I can find cheap hardware and free software and try to play with that, right? Eventually, you can develop something better for your company. Be a self-learner, share the knowledge. What is the fun in knowing too much and not sharing, right? Nobody will know you. Starting with that. Listen to others. You are not always right? And deliver your task on time with quality and security best practices. I believe that these are very simple sentences. The meaning is very simple, but I am amazed how many people don't follow them. Okay, and that's another front to work and that you see in your workplace every day. And not only, I think happens even inside families, right? So this applies inside and outside. Now, the journey, I've been talking about how what I study, how I develop skills, the decision to come here, but nothing of this should have been possible without my family. Honestly, without my mother and my 3 sisters, so 4 moms, not 1 mom, 4 moms. I am the youngest of 4. And then my wife. I told you the story. If not for her, I would never ever find the jobs that she found for me. And she's my motivation, my kids. I think every family happens something like that, right? You find something to keep up all the time and show them how things should be done with integrity, with ethics, and hard work. And if you don't know something, ask. And if something is difficult, think why. Let me tell you something, perhaps to close the loop, but I want to make a very strong sentence that the unconditional and constant support of my wife is key till today. Even today, coming here, she was encouraging me. Right? She's so nice. But what I was going to tell you is I lost track of that. Well, it will come up. Oh, yes, now I remember. sorry about that. When I finished high school, there were those tests, career, what they are called, career assessment. Thank you, right? I did that one, and there was also a psychological evaluation. And when I talk about these topics, I always mention this because I think can put the final touch to this kind of conversation. When I finished that psychological test, the result was that I was never, ever able to be an engineer. I don't know at this point if that test revealed my IQ was too low or I was simply too sloppy taking the test. I have no clue, but the result was that. So what happened at that time was my second sister told me, because I want to be a soccer player. And she told me, no, you are going to be an engineer. And I remember somebody that I call uncle, one of her friends, told me, Carlos is an industrial engineer, and look at him, you know, they grew up together, right? You are going to be an industrial engineer. And to me was, well, what is an industrial engineer? I know civilian engineer, electrical engineer. At that time, I am telling you, I was, what, 17 years old. So the careers that I have in my head were 2, 3 engineering careers. I never heard of industrial engineer. So she told me, you are going to go to this prep academy. It took me 1 year to learn. I was never a bad student in school, but I was never brilliant either. Okay. And I learned, I used to say, I learned in 1 year what I didn't learn in 10 years in school. And when I applied to University of Lima for the undergrad in industrial engineering, I remember there were probably 8,000 applicants. There were several careers, administration, accounting, industrial engineering, and economics, but I think there were probably 50 seats for the engineering program. But out of the 8,000, I was in the 25th spot. And so, okay, I have learned well, right? And my conclusion on that is that I perhaps come from the generation that listened to the elders, right? So I listened to my sister, and she was the one that pushed me, you are going to be an industrial engineer or else, right? Probably that was the message, right? When I finished that career, then a good friend of mine told me, let's go for the MBA to this school. What is an MBA? And he told me, and he's my best friend till today. We know each other since we were 17 years old. And thanks to him, I went to apply with him, and I got into this school for the MBA. I finished my MBA. And when I came to the States, the motivation and the circumstances were different, right? I realized I need a second degree to be more competitive. And also, especially if I want to get in a company that is bigger than the one that I worked before. So I was able to become an engineer. And I think the only good recipe is if you want to, this is another thing that I say, if you want to hit the moon, aim to the stars. And I think that's a lesson that I learned during my life. And here I am open to questions that you may want to ask. I think that's last page, right?
Wow, thank you. Wow, that was,
You like it?
yes.
I am happy to share it.
I loved it. Thank you so much. There's so many things, I guess, comments or questions that I have, but I definitely want to open it up to the guests that we have here in the hub and also that we have online. So if you're with us virtually, feel free to type your question in the chat. I have it here, so I'll be able to read that. But Anthony, you have your hand up.
Yes. PowerPoint. Your resume is a selling tool. You need to put it to work for you and deliver it to the right channels.
Elaborate on that. Yes. Why is a selling tool? Because when you apply to a position, you need to sell your skills. You need to demonstrate or convince the person that is interviewing you that you will add value to the team. And that's what I ask, for example, when I interview candidates for positions to my group. at some point I ask them, okay, let's reverse roles here. Why you need to hire me? Or I ask them, why do you think I should hire you? Right? And the answer to me is because I want to bring value to the team. And since I love soccer and I think applies to any other sport, when you pick up a player, if you pick up a forward, it's because the forward is supposed to score. The midfielder is supposed to be creative, right? And the defense is supposed to defend the last line. And the goalie is supposed to put the face to block the ball, right? If you put somebody that comes to be a skill to be a goalie, you don't put that guy as a forward or as a defense or midfielder and vice versa. So convince me that you are going to bring value, you are going to be an asset and not a liability to the team. That's why I emphasize so much teamwork. I have interviewed candidates with good credentials, but when I ask them, have you ever opened a router, configured a router or a switch? And the answer many times is no. But I have this software and I have done these things in software. I see the heart and the desire to, to learn, to continue doing things. There is another phrase that I use, to jump into the swimming pool with no too much water, right? So that's an attitude that I consider valuable. And I believe that kind of person, because I've done the same, okay? And I learned that over the last almost 38 years. It's not bad to say, no, I haven't done that, but I have done different similar things perhaps. When I was interviewed at Hughes, I remember my first manager at that time, he asked me, have you worked on SDLC protocol? I don't even remember it. It's not the sales, it's not the software development life cycle, it's another protocol. And I told him, no, but I have worked on X500 and explained what I used to do with that protocol. Well, I was hired, okay? And one day during a lunch, I asked him, why did you hire me if I told you that I haven't worked in the protocol that we use, I work in another protocol? Because Juan, you never told me a concrete no. You always said, I have done this and that, I have studied this on my own. And there is another nice anecdote, the one that became my actual first manager. He asked me, have you ever seen a hub? And if you are in networking, hub is the little device with multiple ports, right? Like it's called switch today. Hubs were at that time. I told him, of course, I have seen a hub, 4 ports, 8 ports, 24 ports. And he started laughing at me. And I said, what did I say wrong? And he told me, come here. And we walked to another floor. He opened a door and told me, this is the hub. It was a data center, okay? In a bigger scale, that was the hub. And I was thinking in a little box. So I asked him as well, why did you hire me if I have never ever seen or worked in a real hub? Because my other answers were, I have done all other things. I'm always learning by myself. And actually, he told me something like, I saw you that you were not afraid of facing new things, new challenges. So, okay, fine. But it was natural, right? I was not pretending to be what I'm not, right? I think that honesty is always good. So that's why if you say, yes, I have done this and I always fear the word expert, okay? If somebody tells me I am an expert on this, I will say, oh, what are you doing here, right? Because the word expert means perhaps the inventor, the one that has a super duper IQ, and I welcome that in terms of perhaps productivity, but may not be a good team player. It's difficult to evaluate, right? So I prefer somebody that has a good attitude, a lot of heart, and willing to accept challenges, right? If the challenge is something new, and that person brings value, that's what you put in your resume, right? Bring value, to me, is extremely important because it's not me the one that is going to shine. It's a team performance, right? Let's go back to sports. When a team scores 6-0 to the other team, everybody jumps up to the roof. What a super team. When the team is defeated, where do the fingers point to? The coach is the guilty one. No, this player and this other player. It's the entire team. But when the team performs well, it's the entire team. Everybody. That's why to me, team player, I always emphasize, be a team player. Right? Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. That's why I consider that the resume is the tool that will allow you to put the foot at the door, will catch the attention of the person looking for a candidate. And perhaps in these days, something that I still find that is not nice to deal with a machine, right? That's why you need to be careful spending time preparing your application in these engines, right? But if you do it well, you will catch the attention of somebody, and that will allow you to put the foot at the door. The rest is up to you when the interview comes, right? And you interact with the person and you start selling your skill set. I have done that, it worked. And I advise to anybody that asks me, yes, I think that's the way to go. Another question?
Just a couple comments in the chat of thank you, that's excellent and amazing personal. Oh, here's a question from Taj Thomas. Okay, thank you. Since cybersecurity has become such a huge buzzword and it appears that the professional in cyber, I believe, has millions of unfilled opportunities. Can you recommend other IT roles where novice beginners to the IT workforce can start to develop core experience to develop in time to true cybersecurity professionals?
My experience tells me the following. If you are familiar with the TCP/IP model, layer one is power, is electrical characteristics. Without power, nothing of this works. The second layer is switching. Switches are the devices that allows you to build the infrastructure. For example, the interstate highway is an infrastructure. The electrical grid is an infrastructure. The power outlet there allows you to connect a device that will join the electrical grid. Switches do that. Routers are the cops, right? The ones that direct the traffic and supposed to find the best path from A to B. For example, your MapQuest. MapQuest is an application that does routing. It gives you 3 choices to go from A to B. The rest of the layers, you know, they do connections and, you know, encryption, talks to the application, etc. The foundation is routing and switching from layers 1 to 4, I will say. You can build the most beautiful security policies to allow certain traffic to go to the internet and other users don't go. But if your first layers don't work, nothing else will work. Now, in cybersecurity, it's true, there are a myriad of opportunities. You have analysts. I have friends that work with creating reports for customers, for executives, using syslogging, the raw data from the activities, the events happening in routers, switches, firewalls, load balancers, applications, they do that. The policy makers, the security operations center. For example, in where I work, one of my colleagues, he runs the security operations center, and I define him as the cybercrime unit, the policy makers. I work on the law enforcement side of cybersecurity. I need policies, like in law, right? You need a law to enforce the law. So in cybersecurity, you need a cybersecurity policy, right? The encryption policy, password policy, best usage policy, clean decks policy, and policies for virtually everything that happens in the organization. And then I am able to enforce and shows and educate colleagues. This is the way things happen. You need to develop code with security in mind. Code doesn't only need to work. Okay, after in the Security Plus class, I show several labs where I have tools to show how to break into a system and become super user. It's called hacking, right? Break into a system and then become super user, and the user doesn't know the computer is compromised, right? Multiple careers. There are other ones. For example, I mentioned analysts, security operations, the log analyzers, the law enforcement. I deal with firewalls. I deal with cyber attacks, internet services to block. The same way antivirus software that I think is very familiar with everybody needs to compare against a database to find the signature and say this file is infected or this traffic is infected. There are multiple services already in well-known databases to block traffic from well-known bad sites, right? Sites that have been identified to be bad places, you can block them with the corresponding policies. I think, especially in the cybersecurity area, also in infrastructure, where I work, the infrastructure, what I call routing and switching, there are a million of opportunities to develop multiple kinds of careers, right? I teach the CCNA, which is the entry level to understand routing and switching, and then we build on top of that the cybersecurity. But I have colleagues that have finished the Cisco CCIE, which is Cisco Certified Internet Network Expert, right? For routing, switching, for data centers, for wireless communications. The amount of opportunities in cybersecurity is, yes, I think there is room for tons and tons of people, but honestly, I think there is lack of people getting into the cybersecurity area, right? Did I answer the question correctly?
Yes, and we have 3 questions, 2 that are related.
Okay.
So I'm going to focus on those, and then a follow-up question about the layers. So we had a question about if you want to start cybersecurity classes, how do you go about it? And then another person had a question who's on the pathway saying that he's currently working in a program. The track is Net Plus, SEC Plus, CYSA Plus, Linux Plus, and Pen Plus. Do you believe this is a good track for cybersecurity or necessary? So one is,
yes.
Where do you start in class? How do you do it? And then this person.
Well, there are several paths. One of them is to what I teach, okay? Follow the CompTIA classes, A+, which is related with PC hardware and software. Network Plus, which is agnostic, is a full set of concepts about how a network works, and then comes Security Plus. However, my preferred path is to go for the Cisco CCNA, which is Cisco specific. And why Cisco? Because I don't work for Cisco, I don't sponsor Cisco, just in case. But the majority, in my opinion or experience, of the infrastructure on the internet is Cisco-based. There are many other big players out there, but Cisco is the biggest player. So if you take the CCNA, you don't need the Network Plus, in my opinion. The A+ is useful because I have a kind of a museum in my lab, but I am the kind of person that if I can upgrade this device, I will do, right? So I have a lot of anecdotes, even disassembling my car, and my family going, oh, what you have done, right? So the A+ is good in terms of knowing how the hardware and software in a computer works. And the reason I mention this is because I have Security Plus students that haven't had exposure to PCs and zero exposure to networks. And there are certain chapters, many of them, where I need to talk about IP addressing. I need to talk about the different layers of the network stack, and then I need to set a parenthesis or spend extra hours to go to those classes that belong to CCNA or Network Plus. Now, on the operating systems, definitely Microsoft Windows, I say, is the king of the desktop. I define it that way, okay? And Linux is everywhere as well. Be certain that, most of the software, or probably I will say all the software in this Internet of Things is a subset of some Linux operating system. Okay, I have rebooted, for example, in my work. I remember rebooting a Cisco virtual router, and in the boot up process, the messages said Red Hat. So that's fine. MacBooks is Linux Berkeley. BSD is Linux. In my opinion, Apple took this robust Berkeley Linux and did a wonderful job customizing it, making it pretty, but it's a fully functional operating system that underneath is Linux. So I think that's a very good choice, right? Now, the key to me is to start your career path taking the basics. Networking, routing, and switching, I keep saying, is the foundation. Then you can build on top security. Get a job on that, and then you will start while you work, you can continue studying and get other certifications. In the software development, I think Java is very popular, right? Python is also popular, PHP, Ruby, I believe. I am not a software developer, but I hear my colleagues in the software development area talking about that. So, and you can combine in these days something that is taught in cybersecurity is the DevSecOps model, development security operations. The developers no longer supposed to work writing software. Look at this, my software displays the screen green and looks beautiful. But what if it's totally unsecure? What if the application uses unsecure protocol that a very simple application can reveal the password and user ID in clear text? So today that is not acceptable, right? So that's why, and the operations group is the group that operates the applications and takes care that the hardware is operational, right? So that development security operations is something that needs to be pushed further. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it needs to happen sooner than later, in my opinion. I hope that I gave some feedback on that.
You did, and I also want to mention, of course, Montgomery College is award-winning for cybersecurity programming, both our degree programs and also in our workforce development courses, non-credit as well, with those certifications, of which you are one of our faculty. So we've seen tonight the quality of faculty that we have on staff that are supporting the next generation that's coming up with your wisdom and your experience. So I'm definitely going to make a plug for that. The ITI, we're having winter boot camps that are going to be here at the hub as well. So there are opportunities for any of our guests that are interested in starting. Montgomery College is absolutely a place that you can get started and have great faculty and staff who can guide you along the way to get you to where you need to go. Okay, so the other question, I'll go back. So from a foundation, as you mentioned, layer 2, layer 3, would you recommend the CompTIA certification track before jumping into a specialized certification, for example, CCNA, AWS, GCP, Azure, MCSC, etc., for beginners? I'm noticing that some more than most in cybersecurity without the core experience, as lacking much understanding of core concepts, have a longer tenure of development if core is missing. So I think that you covered that in
yes, I will. Yeah, the CCNA and Security Plus is the order I will choose, because CCNA covers a big area of infrastructure worldwide. It's company specific, but it's a company that is technically everywhere and is the foundation. Okay, I keep saying you don't build a house on the air, right? You need solid foundation, and then depending on the foundation, you can put multiple stories as much as the foundation can support. In networking, I see the same story. If your foundation in routing and switching is strong, the security will become much easier. Now, of course, all of the above needs to go in the best way possible with practice. I keep telling my students, I know with 38 years working in the field and having done so many things on different kinds of computers, I know that my talking is kind of entertaining, right? I, be a show, right? But I know because I tell the truth and I tell you how these things work. But if you don't practice, this is another one of my sayings to try to motivate. We can pretend to go around this building, jogging 10 times in 10 minutes. I guarantee that nobody will finish the first day. So this is like a start training mode. I keep telling them, jogging, let's start going slow but solid. And I guarantee you after 3 months of training, you will do the 10 laps in a good time. Because what? It's practice, right? Without practice, you can listen to me for hours and I will entertain you. I guarantee you that. But if you don't practice, and another thing that I use, and I will finish with this. Years ago, I am not a gaming person, but I bought for my kids a Microsoft Flight Simulator. Very nice game for that time, and teaches you a bunch of things on the screen and the joystick. But let me tell you something, you can become a flight simulator expert on that application, but a very, very different experience will be sitting in the real seat in the plane, right? Can you fly a real plane if you are an expert in Microsoft Flight Simulator? I doubt it. You may see the console, the instruments, but the experience is going to be totally different. That's why when I use software simulations for networks, and then I tell my students now do it in hardware, they tell me, yes, I know the commands, I know what to do, but it's different because it's the real thing. Okay.
We have another question. Do you people train in cybersecurity? So I don't know if that's a question for you or a question for the hub. But do you do the teaching that you do here? Is it in cybersecurity or
it's Security Plus? Right,
Security Plus. Great. So you do that, and then yes, to answer the question, Montgomery College, yes, has training opportunities for cybersecurity, both credit and non-credit. So maybe in the chat we can put the link for that guest so they can navigate that way.
Yeah, I teach CCNA and Security Plus, and I've been teaching 10 years. 2012, yeah, okay. 10 years.
Any questions here in the hub?
No more.
No more.
Okay.
Juan, thank you so much for being here.
Hope to see you again in another opportunity.
Very inspiring. So many, the little pearls that I took of just coming here and that experience coming to this country and what you really had to do.
Right.
But like you said, the motivation and all the principles that you shared, that's what carried you through and brought you here. So we're grateful that you're here. We do have a survey that we'll be putting in the chat, and then of course here in the hub as well. If you could give us feedback on these types of speaking engagements and opportunities that we have. We have one more Future of Tech that's coming up in November, and that is on inclusive and accessible technology. So we'll be hearing from our universal design coordinator here at the college. And then December, we have our final fireside chat for this year with Dr. Shinta Hernandez, talking about virtual and online education equity. And then our last one, Future of Tech, is an artist talking about how technology, how he as a performer uses technology in his craft. So thank you for coming, both in person